Alright, that line has been transferred around an offset 3/8 of an inch, so this line here that I've scribed across will be in the center of the board when it's underneath. Dimensionally here, I've come in 3/4, 3 inches, 5 5/16, and from the other side 3/4 and 3 inches. I'll mark all 4 lines like that. One on each end, this one, and then the one next to it. Okay, the 2 end pieces have been installed, glued and screwed. This section right here I'm beginning to work on. I can't just screw this on here yet because I'm going to add a feature in here. So what I've done is I've laid this out, 2 of these, and it comes in an inch from the end, and then it's just centered on the board. These are going to be drilled and inserted with T-nuts right here, so they will be installed from the top. So I need to put the T-nuts in there and do that, and then screw this together, and then I can put that on. Alright, well, I'm going to explain to you what I've done here. I've drilled out those holes. I started with a 1-inch Forstner bit, and I went down about a 1/16 or so below the surface, maybe an 1/8 inch. So the T-nut fits in there just proper. Then I chased it with a 1/2 inch hole. But rather than try to line this up by eye and then hammer it in there, I'm just going to draw it in. So I've just taken a scrap block and pierced a 3/8 hole. One of the bolts we'll be using later is going to be my mechanical advantage to get this in. So I'm just going to line it up and make sure it looks like that outside diameter is going to hit into that hole. Okay, so now I've got it lined up side to side, and I'm just simply going to take a wrench and draw this in. So I'll go a little ways in, make sure everything's looking good. It is. So that's drawn in now. And this is what I'm going to be using the 2-part epoxy for. I'm just putting some in here just to keep it from falling out, because these fasteners and bolts are going to be coming in and out, this, that, and the other. So everything looks good. I'll do the other one the same way, and then these will be ready for the epoxy. We'll have 4 more to do on the table itself, the stand, and we'll address those later. Well, I'm prepared and getting ready to mix up and put my epoxy in here. This is my plan anyway. I've just masked off this surface around it and cut it out, and then I'm using a little bit of 3/8 fuel line as stoppers. So I'll flood the area and work that epoxy around, and then take my mask off, and I'll pull this out after it cures. Well, that was uneventful. I was hoping for rainbows and fireworks, but I didn't get it. Anyway, I put it in there and I let it set up for maybe 3 or 4 minutes to where it was getting pretty tacky, and I went ahead and pulled my plugs and then pulled my mask off. So the job turned out pretty clean. Appears like it's going to work. I just need to set them aside and let them fully cure. Alright, well, the next thing I'm going to do is screw these sections together, and then I'll screw them onto the top. I'm leaving this a 1/4 inch inset right here, and that's going to give me some air gap here to tighten when I tighten my bolts up. It'll be standing proud of the surface. Alright, well, those 2 pieces have been made. These rows are 5/8 in. They come in 2 inches from either end, and then that one's in the center. And I spaced it that way because I needed to stay away from this right here. And then on the side we'll have another one that is going to go in up in this arena. It's going to be kind of close, but we'll have to sneak one in there as well. Alright, these 2 braces have been installed. Hopefully you can see where I was going with this thing the whole time. This is where the bolts are going to come up from the bottom of this table and cinch these 2 together, and the planer will sit in this area right here. So I'd said I was going to put the sides on and have to take them back off. It turned out I didn't need to do that. So I'm at the point now where I need to start working and preparing and installing the sheet metal on the top, which is, I guess, kind of optional, but I'm going to do it. Aw, man, my 10-year-old contact cement gave up the ghost. Finally, it's dead. I had more than enough to do this job. You think maybe there was a problem with the seal on the can? I don't know, you tell me. But the stores are closed right now, so I'm kind of at a standstill on this project. It's only going to take me about 15 minutes to get this thing put on. So I'm going to jump ahead and do some other things, and then I'll take parts off and backtrack. I was going to do that anyway, so might as well. I want to keep moving. I'll have to get some more tomorrow. Since I didn't have the contact cement, I was getting real tired. I figured I'd pack it in, but I'm changing gears here. I went ahead and set this up, and I've got the planer centered side to side and front to back, and just scribed a line around the bottom just for reference, but I don't have any transfer punches to get in here, so I'm just sticking a bolt down into these holes and giving it a sharp, quick rap with a hammer, and that should give me enough of an impression where I can drill these 3/8 holes completely through this. But since I am going to be putting T-nuts on the bottom, I'm going to find my center point, and I'm just going to go through with a tiny pilot bit, and then I'll do the Forstner bit recess, and then I'll drill out the 3/8 hole to open it up for this. Then I'll shift back on the feed tables. Alright, I have my pilot holes drilled. I drilled them from the top through to the underside. There are 4 of them now. I flipped it over and placed it on some scrap underneath those holes to help prevent blowout. I've also raised the legs up and put a clamp right here so it doesn't come back and whack me in the head. This is my 1-inch bit that I'm going to use to drill for the T-nuts, and it's just been marked with some painter's tape for my depth. I'll be drilling these by hand. I was speaking about 3/8 for some of these holes. That was incorrect. It's a 1/2 inch for the T-nut. And then I'll draw the T-nuts in just like I did before. Put the epoxy in there, and this step will be complete. And then the next 4 holes that are drilled in here will be 3/8, and that'll probably be the next thing I do. Alright, well, I have my T-nuts in, and this has been bolted down temporarily. Somewhere I made a mistake in my measurements. My bolts need to be longer. They grab, but they don't grab good enough for me. I may not have compensated for the depth of that T-nut. Who knows? But anyway, I need 3-inch bolts here instead of 2.5s. There's 2 on the other side as well. So I pulled the covers off just so I could illustrate where they are on my unit. So to install them, I'll be coming through here with the cover on, tightening them up. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is mark and drill the 3/8 holes to bolt this table down. It's kind of a good thing I did it in this order because I have access in here. I can really see what's going on. What I've done at this point is just measured from this casting to set my gap on both sides and get them equal all the way around. I don't care about this. I'm going to measure for the distance there side to side. I'm just worried about front to back right now. I left myself 3/16 of an inch on either end as a gap, so it would be easier to fit this down in and position it. Keep in mind, if you guys were going to measure for something like this, don't just measure this top and make that your distance, because these castings have draft on them. So this is actually up at an angle like this. That's exaggerated, of course. So if you were to measure the top, this is not going to fit. Always flip it over and measure from the bottom, depending on which way the draft is going. So at this point, all I'm doing is marking in here my edges where things are at right now on all corners, and then I'll scribe lines across there, and I'll find my center point of this, and I'll find my center point of this from the bottom, and then I'll measure back and up, and I'll find and locate those holes and then drill them. I just thought, rather than just try to measure 2 separate pieces, I'm just kind of measuring to fit, just in case I had any little errors in there on setting my components. Okay, I just wanted to be clear on what I'm doing here. You may not be able to see my lines, but they are there already. When I had these down on the table, I scribed the front and the back. I'm using this edge here on both sides because it's an easier reference, which is this line right here. So I marked both sides and then scribed a line, and then I halved this, the width of this, in half. This is 21, so it's 10.5 to a mark right there. The second thing I did was on this piece, this is 10 5/8, so 5 5/16 I made a center mark, and I measured back to my center of this, which is 4 5/16, because these are inset 1 inch from the end. They are also coming up from this edge 1 1/4 inches. So the next thing I did was place a line 1 1/4 inches back, and it's this line right here, and that's the center line of my T-nuts. Halved that table again to 10.5, and then came back 4 5/8 in either direction, and those are my points to drill. And I'll do the same thing on the other side, and I'll pierce these 4 holes. I'm probably not going to back these. I guess I could pilot drill and then flip the whole thing over, take this off. I'm just going to carefully go through with this bit and try to minimize the blowout the best I can on the other side. Well, I successfully drilled all 4 of my holes. Got my feed table centered nicely to this, but it's not without issue. Something I never really noticed when I was looking at and measuring and tearing this whole thing apart. The original feed tables on this machine are not in the center of it. They're offset 3/8 of an inch that way. So, by the way, I'm going to use side rails on my table. My table needs to shift 3/8 of an inch over now, or that needs to shift 3/8 that way, which is not an option. So I had all my holes in here. Now I need to pierce ones 3/8 of an inch away, all 4 that way, to get this thing to line up proper. It would have been nice if I caught that originally. I just didn't. So buyer beware. Center to your machine, not necessarily the table you're building. Well, here's my elegant cover up to my problem. I pierced the other hole and I just turned it into a slot. So now it looks okay to the eye, and the casual observer won't know. You guys will. But now it even will act like an adjustment, which might be a benefit. Who knows?